Welcome to Vivid Vibes Podcast. I'm Laura.
And I'm Jada, and today we'll be talking about methods for natural anxiety relief.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anxiety is something that has haunted me from the time that I was in elementary school. Of course, I didn't know what anxiety was then, but just being aware of yourself in a social situation is not something that most elementary school kids feel. And as an adult, becoming aware of what anxiety was and learning how I could control that on my own has really changed my life. And I've honestly made it my mission to just share with as many people as I can all the different ways that you can relieve anxiety.
Well, yeah. Well, I can agree with that. I had anxiety big time growing up myself, and that's led me in my later years into my adulthood wanting to, of course, find methods to alleviate that within me. But now I'm doing what I do, my hypnosis work, to help other people relieve anxiety and give alternative viewpoints.
So I feel like a good place to start today would be to talk about where anxiety comes from and really what anxiety is. Because I think a lot of people can easily just say, oh, I have anxiety, I have depression, and they don't really understand what anxiety is or what depression are. Today we're going to focus more on anxiety, but anxiety is literally the feeling in your brain that there is urgency about something. There's urgency about resolving something that you can't resolve. That's the best way that I can explain anxiety. It feels like there's this survival instinct of fight or flight kicking in, and you might get sweaty palms, you might have shallow breathing, you might not be able to sleep at night, you may be really scatterbrained. Those are all symptoms of anxiety. And it's more than just feeling worried. It's really like, it's like being worried on steroids. Mm-hmm. That's the best way I can describe it.
Well, the other thing that anxiety is, and I think a lot of people don't know this or realize this, is that anxiety is also a symptom of other things going on. Especially, okay, so me and my hypnosis training, I'm going to talk about that a lot on this podcast, by the way. We learn how the mind works with the subconscious mind. So we can take an incident from someone's early development in life, in their younger years. Maybe they got lost in a crowd, you know, and their subconscious mind has the self-preservation mechanism part of the mind. It's now associating big crowds being bad. So as a way of protecting yourself as you get older, now it's going to give you anxiety when you go into a crowd because it thinks it's protecting you. So that's something a lot of people don't realize, is that anxiety, yes, we look at it as it's like this standalone thing that, like, I have anxiety. I don't know why I have anxiety. Well, guess what? There is probably a reason why you have anxiety.
Totally. And a lot of the times too, it's like, I'm sure a lot of the times it is something that's really specific to a person. But something I learned about within the last couple of years is that we live in what's called a delayed return environment. So most animals live in what's called an immediate return environment. So let's say you're a giraffe, okay, and you're grazing in a field and a lion comes. Okay, so immediately you feel that rush of anxiety. You feel that rush of adrenaline telling you run from this animal that's hunting you, right? So you run and whatever, say you get away from the lion, and then that anxiety goes away. So that's like an immediate return. That's an immediate shut off for that anxiety.
Right.
Or even our Paleolithic ancestors who were out foraging for berries, you know, like say you're out in a field and you're foraging for berries, just to give this as a human example, and like a tiger comes, you know, you run from the tiger and you hide and the anxiety goes away. Or you hear a storm coming and you feel worried and you feel stressed that you're going to be subject to the elements, and so you hide, and then when the storm passes or you find shelter and you're safe, that anxiety, that worry, that adrenaline goes away. But today, the things that we worry about, most of them can't be solved immediately. Most of them are things like, how am I going to pay my rent next month? And my check doesn't come for 2 weeks. So there's no shut off for how you're feeling in that moment. It's like for those next 2 weeks, you're just thinking about my check isn't in my bank account. And, you're just thinking of like, it's like almost you're sending the signal to your mind that the only thing to turn off that worry is the money being in your account. But really, you have the power to step in and say, mind, I understand your fear, but I choose not to feel this way.
Right. And I think that's a level of self-awareness that comes into play there as well. Because I feel like we're all on our own unique journeys of figuring out more and more about ourselves and why we feel individually what we feel through our experiences. And finding the reason. Well, here's another thing. Me, and a lot of times in my past and even presently, I'll go through depression spells or anxiety spells, and I don't recognize that that's what it is, that it's anxiety or it's depression until after I kind of get out of it. So I have to kind of now, using the experiences that I've been given through my life at this point in time, I look back at my self in every situation I've gone through and kind of like, wait a minute, I learned this from that. I had this situation come from that. My personal goals of trying to become more and more self-aware has lent me to explore my past in a different way rather than being consumed over these situations that I wish I should have done this different, or I wish I could have done that in a different way, you have to look at what did you gain from that so that it's not overburdening you, as well as how you're looking towards the future too, because that's a big, as you were saying, that's kind of a big thing, looking ahead, worrying about what's ahead, not rather than what we're looking at in the present moment.
Totally. And Eckhart Tolle actually talks about this in The Power of Now, about how depression really comes from looking at the past and thinking, I wish I could have done this differently. And anxiety comes from looking at the future and thinking, oh, how is this all going to play out? But by coming to the present moment and doing things to enhance our nowness, I guess, our groundedness, things that ground us and make us feel present and centered, those are what's really going to help with those feelings of anxiety or depression.
Right.
So I think we should go ahead and dive into that. So Laura, you specialize in hypnosis. Obviously, all of our listeners know that now.
If they didn't, they will become known of that.
But you call a lot of your hypnosis sessions meditations.
Yes, I do.
So let's talk about how hypnosis can help with anxiety.
Yes, I'd love to. So again, similarly to what I said earlier with the example of getting lost in the crowd, there are so many variations to individuals as to what elicits a trauma response, as I would say. Essentially, anything that you experience is unique unto you as an individual. Nobody else is going through it. People can go through similar situations, of course, but uniquely to you, your brain is going to analyze what you're experiencing like from the time you are born. And even in past lives, of course, we can go back and back and back. But anyway, as soon as you have a brain, you are taking in information and you are growing as an individual. So your brain is doing what it needs to figure out what's going to be in your best interest by way of how you feel. And okay, so subconscious mind, again, has the self-preservation mechanism. It's more concerned about your emotional preservation rather than physical, because that kind of also leads into like why smokers smoke. That's another thing for another episode. But anywho, what I do with my hypnosis work and my guided meditations, they are essentially one and the same thing, because even meditation, as most of our audience might know it as, you are essentially becoming present with yourself. You are now diving into deeper waters in your own mind. And me, with my hypnosis work, I'm there to act as a guide to help keep you on track so that you are now being allowed the space to focus on what you want to focus on. I'm not forcing anybody to focus on something that makes them uncomfortable, but should their mind get to a place of a memory of something that like, oh, this didn't make me feel good, I don't know if I want to recall this. Well, you know what? Now, me being there, I can use my training and my hypnosis techniques to help keep a person in the mindset to more objectively view the past experiences or the past memories that might come up. And now we can detach the emotional elements that are making you uncomfortable. So now I simply can use the wording, view yourself floating above the scene, and now look down at it as if you were watching a TV or a movie play out. And the subconscious mind is now able to do that. It's in a more objective headspace rather than in our conscious headspace. And so you can view those situations, preferably as an adult, or at least within a mature person, can look back at their whatever situations come up, maybe from their childhood, right? And see like, oh, well, that makes sense how, okay, so yeah, I did get lost in a crowd as a kid. But I know now as an adult, I know how to take care of myself. I know that I'm not really in any major danger if I'm in a crowd. I just have to release those associations. So you take that objective perspective in your adult viewpoint now, and you can apply it to your past memories and release that anxiety in that moment. So hypnosis for me helped me overcome a lot of my personal anxieties greatly. And I found it to be one of the most fast modalities for that. One of the fastest modalities to overcome anxiety, personally, at least.
That's awesome. It's such a powerful tool to be able to like delve into your subconscious mind and unprogram or reprogram, because a lot of the things that we worry about, we don't even realize that we're worrying about until we can get to those places.
Right. Well, the mind is a very efficient thing. It's a very complex thing. It's doing things without our awareness.
Yeah. So one thing I would like to touch on is the power of movement to release things. So I'm a yoga instructor. And when I did my yoga instructor training, I was like crying my eyes out after practice for like the first few days. And I didn't realize why I was crying my eyes out. And there were also all these like feelings of social anxiety coming up for me, thinking like, will I make friends here? Are these people making friends without me? Like things that I would think when I was a child. And then one day I just sat with it. I just went to my room and I just sat with it after practice, and I just let myself lean into that feeling. And I just invited it to come up. And rather than pushing it down and saying, I don't want to feel this, I invited it to come up. Like I wanted to see what it was. So when I did that, it was like this scene played in front of my eyes. And it was of this little girl. I was a little girl in this vision, but I was probably about 8, and I was sitting at my desk and I had written a poem, and this other little girl picked up the poem and she read it out loud, and her friends laughed at me. And it made me realize that this thing that was hurting me so bad was this anxiety of being rejected as a child, and my creativity being rejected as a child. And that was so heavy, and that was so powerful to realize. And I truly believe in my heart that movement is what invited that to come up, because like one of my massage therapist friends told me, your issues are in your tissues. Like we hold on to things in our bodies, and whenever we're able to move through them, whenever we're able to move our bodies and we're able to run or do yoga or dance or any kind of free movement, we're inviting those issues to be released. And releasing is not easy. It's not like rainbows and butterflies, like, oh, I just released that thing and now I feel better. It's like you feel it all the way.
Yeah.
And then you have to, then you have to invite the feeling and then say, okay, I learned this from this feeling. Thank you for showing me like why I'm feeling this way. And then deciding how you do want to feel. And then going from there.
Yes. Well, yes, like you're saying, you feel it come through. It's the feelings that we feel. I view them, they're energy. Like everything is energy. Everything is its own unique vibration. And so what we're doing, we're now allowing our physical form to vibrate on a certain frequency. We're now being able to release certain energies by aligning with them. They will come up when we elicit some new activity or movement. And even I'm also an artist. So to me, that is another modality that I use to release certain energies. And everybody's going to find what feels right to them, what makes them feel good. You know, we all kind of have our own unique hobbies and interests.
Totally.
But that I feel aligns with what you're saying about the movement. It's like we are all maybe unconsciously or maybe consciously, it depends on the individual, you know, tapping into those energies. And the energies can translate to our mind, and our minds can evoke certain thoughts. And it's dependent upon us on how we're analyzing those thoughts and those feelings when they do arise. Because I think, as you're touching on, a lot of people they do want to, like, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to feel that. I don't want to address that. So they learn how to repress that because that doesn't feel good in that moment. So it's easier to repress than to address. But I think we all we have to learn how to address them more and more, because that allows us to be more in control. We are in control when we are addressing these things that we feel have the power to make us feel uncomfortable.
It's interesting to hear you say control, because one of the like kind of on the opposite side, like one of the things that helps me when I feel really anxious is just reminding myself I don't have to control everything.
Right. Well, again, that's totally true too. That again, that's on the individual spectrum.
But that's more so like saying that I don't have to control the things outside of me. Like you're saying you can control the things inside of you, because you can. Yes. But like by saying to myself, even by saying that I can detach judgment from things, oh my gosh, it's like a weight is lifted off my shoulders. I think naturally we have a tendency to want to stick an attachment onto everything. Like saying, I like this, I dislike this. This is good, this is bad. That's pretty, that's ugly. I enjoy this, I don't enjoy this. Like, but whenever you tell yourself, hey, I don't have to stick my little judgment onto everything, you're like, I'm present again.
Yeah. Well, there's another thing to that on that same level though. Within us, I think everybody does that on an internal level. This feeling's bad or that feeling's good.
Yes.
This aspect about myself is good or that is bad. We're doing that internally, which then projects outwardly. So when we find ourselves, I think that's something that people can do at home if they haven't already done this. They can try to view that. Like when you do find yourself viewing a situation or a person or an experience as a bad one, or vice versa, a good one, try to analyze that internally. What is that showing you on the inside? What is it reminding you of on the inside? Because if something is negative that you're perceiving as negative, what is it reflecting inwardly, or what is it bringing up on a negative spectrum inwardly.
Nice. Yeah, that's so true. So while we're talking about all this, I would really love to touch on some different methods for anxiety relief that you guys can do at home.
Yes.
So one major thing, and I stress this to everyone. Ironically, I'm saying I stress this. I invite everyone to do this. And that's to have some kind of morning ritual where you decide how you're going to be before you start doing. Because so often we just start doing. We wake up and we say, I have to do this and this and this. But before that, deciding how you want to be. And this can be a 5-minute ritual that you do in the morning, or this can be an hour ritual in the morning. You know, it's really up to you on how you want to do it. And there's so many different ways that you can do it. But I know for me that when I have some kind of little practice in the morning that lets me get into my body and get in touch with myself, then I feel so much more centered and grounded throughout the day. And I don't find myself worrying about the future or worrying about the past. I'm just in the present moment. So some things that I like to do in the morning are a 10-minute meditation where I focus on gratitude, loving kindness meditation, and visualization, where I like kind of daydream about things to come, and I feel that helps bring them to life. Another thing I like to do is have a one-woman dance party in my room.
Beautiful.
Yes, I'll put on I love to dance to This Girl Is on Fire by Alicia Keys. I'm like, yes. Just twirling around my room, or something super silly. I'll put on some twerking music and twerk in my room. I don't care. But just moving and being with myself and getting excited for the day just makes me feel so good. And of course, yoga. Obviously, I'm going to recommend yoga to everyone because that's the practice of connecting your mind and your body and your soul and just getting centered in that discipline and that feeling of wholeness before starting your day. But you can journal, you can do a card reading for yourself, you can use a pendulum, you can honestly, while you're in the shower, you can say, this water is cleansing away anything that's no longer serving me. And then at the end of the shower, switch the water to cold and say, I'm awake, alive, alert, aware, and ready for the day. Mm-hmm. That's like a little shower meditation you can do. There's so many different ways to decide how you want to be before you start doing.
And for people that aren't in that normal practice, something else I can suggest that you do, it's as easy as waking up and making yourself a cup of coffee and not thinking about what's to come, not thinking about what you did yesterday, but being present in the enjoyment of the moment that you are enjoying this beverage in front of you. And it can be whatever you choose, of course. It doesn't have to be coffee if that's not your thing. But being present with yourself, I think, is key to recalling or bringing forward what you need to be aware of. In terms, again, not worrying about the past, not worrying about the future. You can set those intentions by all means, but I think for people that it seems too much of, I do think I know people that would think that's too much of a stretch for them. It can be the easiest things if you're not in that practice, just to give yourself attention in the moment, without thinking about anything in particular.
Yeah, all of those things. I mean, obviously, I would not do all of those things in one morning.
No, but they're still great. They're still great suggestions, no doubt.
But yeah, any of those things can be something that you take 5 minutes and do, even when you're making your coffee, before you take the first sip of your coffee, to even close your eyes and think of 5 things that you're grateful for that day. That shifts your mindset into thinking about what you already have instead of thinking about what you don't have, which a lot of the time is where anxiety can come from, thinking about what we don't have. And we'll have to do a whole nother episode about abundance mindset.
Yes.
But yeah, even just thinking to yourself, before you take that first sip of coffee, I'm grateful that I can make myself a cup of coffee in my kitchen. I'm grateful that I woke up in an air-conditioned room this morning. I'm grateful that I have a shower. I'm grateful that I have friends and family who love me, and I'm grateful that I have a job to go to. Mm-hmm. Things that we take for granted, that how long did that take me? Like 10 seconds to say? And that can totally shift the perspective of your day, and that can totally shift you into a place of being.
Right.
But taking a second to say, this is how I want to be before I start doing.
Right. Now, you can also go on the spectrum, because I've had friends that suffer through severe anxiety and depression, and they could very well argue with us right now saying, like, there's nothing for me to be grateful for. I don't feel it right now. You know what? Take that and use it. If you're pissed off at the world, look at your cup of coffee and pretend it's the world in your hands. You're in control of that, and you say, you know what, fuck you, I'm going to drink you, and you're going to be my little bitch. Do that too. Goodness. I mean, whatever works for you. It's self-discovery. You have to find what feels good to you and know that whatever you're addressing inwardly is in your power to do so.
One thing I would like to touch on too before we're done, because we're almost out of time for today, is nutrition and the effect that it has on our mind. Obviously, we'll probably have to do a whole nother episode about this, but literally 90% of your serotonin, or the feel-good chemical in your brain, is produced in your gut. So whenever you eat things that are not so good for you, and you're not eating clean, and you're not eating fruits and veggies and, whatever else you need to be eating, and maybe you're eating like a lot of empty carbs and sugar and things like that, it's going to have a direct effect on your mind. And also, kind of ironically, since we're talking about coffee, but caffeine is like
That's a big one.
Yeah. If you're having really bad anxiety and you feel like you want to say, fuck you world, I'm going to drink you, maybe don't drink the coffee.
Switch to tea for a day. A decaf.
Yeah, maybe switch to tea forever. Because I know for me, I actually... I got in a car accident one time, like a road rage kind of back and forth thing. And when that happened, I was super caffeinated. Like I was just really, I'm already a pretty high strung person. Like I'm like, let's go do yoga. Let's go to this thing. Like I always want to be doing something. So whenever I drink coffee, sometimes it can kind of push me over the edge, or even black tea can push me over the edge. Mm-hmm. But switching to matcha made a really huge difference for me.
And you know what? I think that is the thing, because again, my mind instantly goes back to those people that I know who would argue that, like, well, I ain't giving up my coffee, right? You know, maybe you don't have to give it up right now, but put that in your mind that maybe that is a small step that you do want to try to take for yourself in time. Don't rush yourself in changing the way you feel overnight, but be more conscientious of why you might be feeling that way. Why do you feel the need to drink your coffee? Why do you feel the need to have this substance help moderate the way you feel? Because if you're just doing it just because that's the only way you think you can function, you're using it essentially as a coping mechanism. And by no means am I perfect. I still drink coffee, you know, and I recognize why it is a coping mechanism for me. And I'm still going through the process of trying to work through that and trying to help myself. I know what my vices are, and I think a lot of people do at the same time recognize their vices on an individual level. But we all just have to take the step to be more conscientious of why we do what we do.
Yeah, totally. Because, I mean, there are plant medicine, like CBD and things like that, that would help with anxiety. But if you're always leaning on that as a crutch, then it's like, okay, maybe it's okay to take a day off of whatever this thing is and tune into how you feel. Right. I've been at the point where, honestly, the turning point for me with wanting to switch to natural methods was when I was 18 years old and I was on medication for anxiety, depression, allergies, thyroid, and I don't even remember what else, asthma. Excuse me. And I just remember looking at my nightstand and thinking, I'm 18 years old. Like, why do I need all these pills just to feel normal, you know? And that's when it really clicked for me, because before then, honestly, I was at that point, if someone would have said to me, like, what are you grateful for? I would have been like, do you know how I feel right now? You know, I would have felt like they were slapping me in the face by saying, what are you grateful for? But honestly, in those moments, in those lows, when we can't even say what we're grateful for, that's when we are taking things for granted. Like, it hurts to imagine saying that to my 18-year-old self, but like, I understand just because someone else is going through something worse than you doesn't invalidate what you're going through. But there are people who, live in parts of the world who don't get to wake up in a comfy bed, who don't get to have food whenever they want it, who don't have people in their lives who love them, who don't have jobs to go to. And by taking a step back and detaching from this pain or this anxiety or whatever it may be, and saying, okay, well, there are good things in my life, that's inviting a new method of thinking into the mix. And that's not to say that it's going to cure anxiety overnight or it's going to shift. I mean, it is going to shift your mindset. It absolutely is. Even saying you're grateful for one thing is going to make a difference. But I understand that's totally not easy for so many people. But by detaching from the pain, by detaching from whatever it is, we can say like, okay, like, not I don't have it so bad, because if you feel like super anxious all the time, yeah, that sucks. That's like the worst, maybe not the worst feeling, but it's not a good feeling. Nobody wants to feel that way. But like, when you can take a step back and say, I have a bed to sleep in, and just focus on that, even for like 2 seconds, then you're inviting a new way of thinking.
But one last thing I want to throw out there, kind of on that topic, when I do my tarot card readings, biggest thing that I'm doing when I'm reading someone's cards is bringing to light things that they are unconscious to within themselves. But a common theme that comes up is reminding people that, you know what, when you get to feeling like you're at the lowest of the low that you can possibly feel, the universe is trying to send you a message at that point. Not that it's trying to kick you down and keep you down, but when you get to that point of feeling that low, all you can do at that point is be present with yourself at this most raw, like naked version of you that is very vulnerable, that's very uncomfortable to be present with. But once you give yourself that opportunity, you have nowhere else to go but to be present with yourself at that point. That is when you are allowing yourself to view yourself in the most authentic way that you can, without having guards up, without using coping mechanisms to repress certain things, without ignoring these aspects within you that naturally we want to ignore. You now have to face these things. And that, I think, is also the next, or like a big step for an individual to become more self-aware, to higher ascension, to get to the next phase of their evolution by viewing themselves at this lowest state. Because then when you get past that and you're able to use that as like a bookmark for yourself in your life, you look back at that chapter and you're like, whoa, I learned so much about myself in that moment that I would never have learned otherwise if I hadn't gone through that, if I hadn't felt that. And you probably, same person, might not be able to empathize with other people at the same level if they hadn't gone through those experiences, feeling those lows as well.
Totally. Like, by no means am I saying like ignore your pain, because the things that we feel pain about are teaching us something. They're always teaching us something. But I guess what I'm getting back to is the fact that in your morning each day, no matter what it is you're going through, you have the power to tap into the feeling of inner peace that exists within you at your very core. And no matter what's swirling around you on the outside, and when you're ready to tap into that and you're ready to feel, to lean into your pain and say, okay, what is this teaching me? Totally do that. Right. But at your very, very core, at the very center of you is peace. And that's your natural state. And we all have the power to align with that. And it's from that we're able to say, what is this pain teaching me? You know? So I feel like a really good thing for us to talk about next week would be shadow work.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we're kind of already getting into it, right?
I think we are. Yeah, definitely.
So,
and before we go,
yeah,
I want to remind our listeners that no matter what you are feeling, how anxious you're feeling, how low you're feeling, we in the universe believe that you are deserving and worthy of everything and anything positive that could come your way. You have to remind yourself that too at times, though, that you are deserving. You are existing. You have purpose by just existing.
absolutely. That was beautiful, Laura. Oh, I love you.
I love you, Jane.
But yes, absolutely, everybody. You deserve to feel at peace, and peace is your natural state. And this was a juicy episode.
Yes.
All right. So I guess on our next episode, we'll be talking about shadow work.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for listening today, guys. If you could pop over to the iTunes store and leave us a review, we would love that so much. And please feel free to follow us on social media for updates on all of our new episodes. We're at Vivid Vibes Podcast on Instagram, facebook.com/Vivid Vibes Podcast. And if there's anything specific that you guys want to hear about in the next episode, please feel free to shoot us an email. You can email us at vividvibespodcast@gmail.com, and we will do our best to answer all questions on the next episode. Have a good day, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in.